see, was viewed in terms of the phenomena-noumena distinction. Viewed, if you like, in the light of the representational theory of knowledge, which left you with a lot of unanswered questions about the reality that it's supposed to represent. It's noticeable that people like Bradley, their works on metaphysics bear the titles like Appearance and Reality. That was Bradley's title, Appearance and Reality. Now, essentially, what the positivist movement is doing is saying all we know are the appearances, ruling out the reality. Notice that as you read John Stuart Mill. If you're interested in the question about mind and body, what is mind? Says Mill, mind is just a permanent possibility of reflections, ideas of reflection. Now, mind isn't a thing. We don't know anything about its reality. What we mean by the word mind is, well, that which presumably is involved with further experience in the future, the permanent possibility of reflections. Well, what's matter? Permanent possibility of sensations. And you say, that's not what matter is, it's what matter does. Well, phenomena, that's what it is for us. So a thoroughgoing phenomenalist view develops in Comte, Mill, Mach. Bertrand Russell, yes and no, depending which decade of Bertrand Russell's career you're reading. He reserved the human person's right to change his mind and did it quite successfully at times. So that's the characterization. Now, how does this come out in these individuals? Well, first of all, Auguste Comte, Frenchman. Died in 1857. You have a chapter about Comte in Stumpf, and you have some selections in Gardner's anthology. You'll find Comte easy to get a hold of, easy to read. Watch for two things. One is his law of three stages. The other is his contention about the unity of science. Now, the law of three stages is his formulation of an empirical generalization about the history of science. He's an empiricist, and he's interested in the history of science. So he's going to give you an empirical generalization about the history of science. Namely, that science evolves through three stages. From a religious stage to a speculative stage to a scientific stage. Now, the religious stage, of course, produces theology, mythology, and so forth. Fictions. Imaginative fictions, like the Divine Right of Kings, over which Charles I lost his head, you remember. Or fetishes in primitive animism. notions of divine providence. This is the imaginative childhood of the human mind. The second stage is the speculative, dealing with abstract ideas, constructs, metaphysical constructs, like theories of universals and essences, natural law ethics and jurisprudence, theories of natural rights, democratic ideals like all men are born equal, which are hardly empirical generalizations, notions of teleology, alchemy, astrology, final causes. You see, all these involve speculative theories about hidden realities. This is the adolescence of the human mind. But the third stage is empirical, scientific, dealing with what is positively known, what we can positively assert, hence the term positivism. What can be positively asserted, certain. This is the maturity, the adulthood of the human mind. And it's here in the scientific stage, then, that what we try to do is to formulate general covering laws. A general covering law is an empirical generalization that covers all the data. General covering laws. And it's on the basis of those general laws, generalizations, that you can make your predictions. And therefore develop technology to make use of natural processes. So the positive stage then is that to which the sciences are evolving. Now he tries to trace the various sciences in this way. Religion has evolved to the metaphysical stage. A lot of theology is simply metaphysics. Chemistry has evolved, of course, from primitive fetishism through alchemy to science, empirical science. But what he is particularly anxious to see develop is a science of social change. A science of social change. After all, he's living in the first half of the 19th century in France, and if you're familiar with French history, it was an age of upheavals. So we want a science, an empirical science of social change. And this is the beginning of what now has become sociology. Soc majors, if you look into the history of your science, you'll find this is the way it began. There was another man roughly contemporary, a little bit older with Auguste Comte, a man named Saint-Simon. But sociology began in an attempt to be thoroughly empirical. And it's only in very recent years, matters of a decade or two, that sociology has begun to incorporate some of the phenomenological tradition and to recognize subjectivity and so forth, the influence of people like Max Weber. The unity of science is the second emphasis in Auguste Comte. Very simple. It's the notion that all of the sciences follow essentially the same method. All sciences follow essentially the same method. There's no differentiation between the study of nature and the study of human beings. The same method prevails for both. Ought to. And that thesis of the unity of the sciences is one of the things in Comte which has persisted into the 20th century, emphasis on the unity of the sciences. That's what Dewey is working with, where he tries to take the developed scientific method in reconstruction in philosophy and say this needs to be applied to social change, to handling social problems, to politics, to education, so on and so forth, unity of the sciences. The differences between the sciences are differences of complexity. In that, sociology, for instance, has to build on psychology. Psychology has to build on biology. Biology has to build on chemistry. Chemistry has to build on physics. Physics has to build on mathematics. So there is a hierarchical arrangement of the sciences in terms of their complexity. And it's interesting that historically they have developed in that sequence, more and more complex. Well, that's my summary of Auguste Comte. Notice if you have the Gardner Anthology, did you bring it? I should have warned you. Notice on page 151, his comments about Descartes. Yeah, every French philosopher has to pay dues to the Descartes Union. And here's Comte's dues. While Descartes was rendering to the world the glorious service of instituting a complete system of positive philosophy, yes, what you know for certain, the reformer, with all his bold energy, was unable to raise himself so far above his age as to give it complete logical extension by comprehending in it the part of physiology that relates to intellectual and moral phenomena. The part of physiology that relates to intellectual and moral phenomena. After having instituted a vast mechanical hypothesis upon the fundamental theory of the most simple and universal phenomena, he extended the same philosophical spirit to the different elementary notions, relations of the animal organism. But when he arrived at affections and the intellect, he stopped abruptly and constituted from them a special study as an appurtenance of metaphysico-theological philosophy. A word like that has to be something bad. To which he thus endeavored to give a new kind of life after having wrought far more successfully in sapping its scientific foundations. And on the next page, 152 at the bottom, what he's after, you see, is the positive theory of the affective and intellectual functions, which is this: it consists in the experimental and rational study of the phenomena of interior sense, ideas of reflection, proper to the cerebral ganglions, brain physiology, apart from all immediate external apparatus. He should have had a brain science. So what he's after is very plain, and you notice that by virtue of this extension of scientific method, he's advocating a methodological naturalism of the kind we met in John Dewey, right?